All right, so this is a good diagram showing, okay, how do we put this all together actually physically? These are actually bad examples of an AP. This is some stupid little thing that doesn't cost much money, really. Nah, I don't want to talk about that. But basically, they do kind of look like this. They usually put them on the ceiling because it's easier to push it downward. Now, so this is not what we would do in our house, right? This is what a big business would do, or even a smaller, medium-sized business would do. And so you've got things broken down. You've got an access point, and its radius doesn't go out like a square. Obviously, it goes out like a circle, but they've got it like it's a room, you know. And so it's covering a certain area. Then you have to put the next access point someplace where they're not really going to overlap much. So you got a little tiny overlap here. So those are the access points. And STA just means station. So those are just computers, devices out there. And how do these two? Well, let me describe the problem. Back in the day, you would have set up an access point, say in one building, and then you go down to the floor below. Say you've got a 2 or 3 story building, and it just really can't get a signal very well. And so you put another access point down there. So back in the olden days, those access points, this would have been 20 years ago, would have not communicated with each other. They would have directly tied into the network and transmitted the information to the network. So what you'd have to do is set up every single access point with the same wireless name and the same passphrase. That way, as a person went between the two, it would reconnect to the new access point. And that caused some problems because sometimes it wouldn't reconnect well. It would actually try to send the signal over to that one it was originally attached to, and it was really bad. So it got better. What they're not showing you in this picture that's on the screen is that there would be a cable running from those access points. Instead of this cloud sitting over there, it would run over to a device that's plugged into the network. And so all the access points in that building would plug into that device. So really, the device is the access point, and the other things are just kind of antennas. Kind of like you're saying, I'm going to put these cameras in these different rooms and I'll be able to see these rooms, except you're doing it with wireless. And so that lets you create this big network, and as your computer roams around, it will switch antennas, but it's never really switching to a different device, right? It's all going into one device. And that makes it so that you don't have that lag, and you don't have that thing where it's like, hey, I'm still trying to connect to this device that's actually not as good, because it'll switch off and connect to the device it needs to connect to much easier. So that's what they're not showing here, is that these access points would be wired into a central device for this organization. That's what this cloud shows. Right, that cloud makes us think of the internet, right? But oh wait, the internet's over here. Yeah, so they should have this, showing that this is a piece of equipment, and you can have those pieces of equipment spread across your network so that these pieces can talk to one another, and it's all the same wireless network, which is pretty fantastic. So what they want to show you is that they divide that up. So there's a BSS and then there's an ESS. And so we'll take a look at what those terms stand for. There's our station, there's our access point. The BSS is a basic service set. And so Wi-Fi, when you think of wireless, oh man, that goes back, right? So that telcos, right? The telcos did all the Wi-Fi. When we attached or created the internet, right, it was just using the telco network. And a lot of that telco network is done through wireless, done through big old towers that send data back and forth. So a BSS is also called a cell, and they can communicate with each other. And then you have, we're going to skip IBSS, and we're going to go to our ESS. That is the extended service set, and that is what feeds into this distribution system. So what you can think of is that DS, and I forget, you probably can't see my arrow on the screen. So that bottom thing, the DS, is like saying that's EAC's wireless network. And because of let's just look at it like North and South Campus. And so we'd have the North Campus ESS, and then on the North Campus ESS we would have the Technology Centers BSS, we'd have the Math Science BSS, we'd have the Activity Center BSS, right? Those would all be areas or basic service set identification for those areas, and they would all tie in to the North Campus ESS. And we'd also have the South Campus ESS, and both of those would be part of the whole EAC distribution system. Why they have all this, so I know that's a lot of information, and you're like, oh my goodness, do I need to know this? If you're gonna work in this stuff, yes. If you're not, then yeah, you probably don't need to remember this stuff. It's nice to know, because when you see these antennas, then you'll know what's going on. But they've made all of these definitions so that we can talk about it, right? If you were really not a service provider, but a specialist that dealt with Wi-Fi, how would you go and talk to somebody? You'd step in there and go, okay, well, what's your DS here? I mean, what's your area of coverage that you're dealing with, and how do you have that broken out? So what's your ESS, right? And it may be small, and so your distribution system and your ESS are the same, that kind of thing. Now let's talk about something everybody needs to know, because you do deal with this. There is something called the SSID, and these days we tend to call that the wireless network name. So when you go to somebody's house and their Wi-Fi pops up, that's the SSID that's showing. And so again, this goes back to telcos. That's why it's called the service set identifier, because that's a term that they use to service set. And so the SSID is a 32 character value, and it's inserted into each frame, because then that tells the computer and the access point which Wi-Fi they're a part of. And the SSID is case sensitive. But again, right, you pull up your phone and it's going to show you what the SSIDs are around. So sometimes it's called the extended service set ID or the basic service set, but usually it's just the SSID. And then there's your basic service set, which is a 48-bit value that identifies the AP and the infrastructure of, or the STA in an ad hoc network, which, again, we don't really use. So that's the wireless infrastructure in putting that together. So if I, let me see, I had to do some stuff for something else I was doing. Let's open a blank document. All right, so let's go ahead and draw, because I can do that on my screen. So what you're going to end up doing is you've got an access point here, and that's in one room, and then you're going to have an access point here in the next room, which is what EAC does. And actually at EAC, if we were to scroll down, there's a hallway, right, that's coming down towards my office. And back over here, they have another access point, because there's offices back here. And of course, over here is customer service, and they have an access point here. Right, so all of these access points then are going to tie in together. So every single one of these, even though you can't see it, has a wired connection coming out of it going over to customer service, and even that access point. So all of it's going to tie into one central box right here, and it's going to read the signals and figure out what to do with it. And then this box is actually going to be plugged right into the network. And that's how that's going to happen. Now in your house, it's a lot easier, right? In a small network, let's get that deleted. We'll get there eventually. So in your house, you just have your house. And yes, you do have different rooms, so we'll make some rooms here. But you usually have your access point over here, and then that's directly plugged into the World Wide Web. That's supposed to be WAN right there. So that's plugged into the WAN, and then it just broadcasts out the signal throughout the entire house, which bounces all over the walls and goes wherever, and it doesn't have any other access point it needs to talk to. It's all by itself. And that just goes and routes your traffic out to the internet. All right, well that is that. Hopefully you were able to take some good notes and turn those in. I'll get on to the next section.